They called it a kitchen, just an industrial canteen in northeast Berlin, serving 30,000 meals daily to Nazi welfare workers in 1938. But June 1945 changed everything. The Red Army rolled through Berlin's rubble, and the Soviets saw opportunity where others saw destruction. Genslerstrasse 66 became Special Camp No. 3. The kitchen that once fed fascists would now break them. Over 20,000 prisoners passed through that camp between 1945 and 1946. Former Wehrmacht officers, police officials, Nazi party members, suspected spies, saboteurs, anyone Moscow deemed dangerous to the new order. They crammed them into rooms designed for food preparation. 886 died officially. Independent estimates triple that number. Bodies dumped in bomb craters like refuse, the smell of death mixing with damp concrete and human waste. If you value documented Cold War history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the Berlin Hohenschönhausen Memorial Foundation archives, published in April 2025, and the Federal Commissioner for Stasi Archives official documentation from the German Democratic Republic State Security Ministry records. These aren't generic tourist guides. These are the deep institutional sources that reveal exactly how systematic the horror became. Now back to the information. October 1946, Special Camp No. 3 closes, but the prisoners stay behind. They build their own cages. The Soviets force them to excavate the basement of the old canteen, carving 60 cells from concrete and earth, windowless, bunker-like. The guards call it the U-boot, the submarine. From 1947, it becomes the central Soviet remand prison for occupied Germany. Wooden plank beds, metal buckets for waste, light bulbs burning 24 hours to scramble time, interrogations at night when exhaustion breaks resistance, hours of standing, days in special detention cells, water dripped onto heads in total darkness. Hot cells reaching 53 degrees Celsius, the Soviets' perfect techniques that bypass the body and attack the mind directly. 1951. Stalin's empire consolidates. The newly formed Ministry for State Security, the Stasi, takes control. They inherit not just a prison, but a system. The U-boot becomes their laboratory. Walter Ulbricht's East Germany needs enemies to justify its existence. The submarine provides them by the thousands. June 17th, 1953. East German workers revolt. Soviet tanks crush the uprising in Berlin. Hundreds disappear into Hohenschönhausen's depths. Georg Derdinger, East Germany's own foreign minister, Christian Democrat turned communist, finds himself in the submarine after falling from grace. Paul Merker, Politburo member of the Socialist Unity Party, vanishes from public view and surfaces in the U-boot's corridors. The revolution devours its children. West Berlin lawyer Walter Linze discovers the reach of Hohenschönhausen's arm in 1952. Stasi operatives kidnap him from the streets of the western sector. He dies in Moscow after months in the submarine. His crime, investigating Soviet abductions for the Americans. The message resonates through both Berlins. No border stops the Stasi's hunt. 1955. Karl Wilhelm Fricke, journalist, critic of the regime, disappears from West Berlin streets. 15 months of interrogation at Hohenschönhausen break his resistance. Secret trial. 4 years in prison. His story reveals the system's hunger for validation through confession. The submarine doesn't just hold prisoners, it manufactures guilt. Labor prisoners build the new complex in the late 1950s. 200 cells, interrogation rooms, hospital wing with 28 beds, x-ray equipment, operating theaters, morgue. Exercise cells, prisoners call tiger cages. The submarine stays operational, but the focus shifts upward. Psychological precision replaces crude brutality. 1961 changes everything. The Berlin Wall rises overnight on August 13th. The stream of refugees stops. Hohenschönhausen adapts. Would-be escapees fill the cells where political dissidents once rotted. The prison becomes a processing center for anyone caught fleeing the workers' paradise. Inside the new building, the Stasi refines its craft. Traffic light systems prevent prisoner contact in hallways. Red lights mean freeze, look down. When they extinguish, movement resumes under guard supervision. Communication reduced to 3 commands. Come, go, stand. Isolation becomes total. Psychological pressure replaces physical torture. The Academy of the Ministry for State Security in Potsdam develops the science behind the suffering. Operative psychology becomes a formal discipline. Research papers, dissertations, teaching manuals. The Stasi transforms interrogation from art to algorithm. Sleep deprivation calculated to the hour. Stress positions timed for maximum effect. Social destruction mapped like military campaigns. 1971. Erich Honecker replaces Walter Ulbricht as East Germany's leader. The The new boss wants respectability, international recognition. The Helsinki Accords of 1975 demand human rights commitments. Physical torture becomes diplomatically embarrassing. Psychological warfare offers the perfect solution: invisible, deniable, devastating. Zersetzung. Decomposition. The Stasi's gift to the vocabulary of oppression. Not arrest, but psychological destruction. Not cells, but mental paralysis. Directive No. 1/76 formalizes the process in January 1976. The goal? Switch off regime opponents through calculated psychological attack, make them implode from within while the state maintains plausible deniability. 5,000 people suffer persistent Zersetzung operations, rumors planted, relationships destroyed, career sabotage, family alienation. The beauty of the system: victims often don't realize they're under attack. When they report harassment, friends consider them paranoid, perfect crime disguised as mental illness. Rudolf Barrow, Marxist scholar turned dissident, experiences Hohenschönhausen's evolution in the late 1970s. 2 years for critiquing the system from within. His book, The Alternative in Eastern Europe, becomes contraband. The interrogations focus not on breaking his body, but dismantling his worldview. Psychological dissection performed with scientific precision. Jürgen Fuchs, writer and activist, survives the submarine's depths and later documents his psychological annihilation. He describes Stasi methods as psychosocial crime and assault on the human soul. His testimony reveals the system's sophistication, each case tailored to individual psychology, human weaknesses identified and exploited with clinical efficiency. The prison hospital becomes ground zero for medical experiments. 28 Stasi staff under Dr. Herbert Vogel run operations in 1989, X-ray equipment with unclear purposes, leukemia clusters among former inmates. The Gauck Commission later identifies unusual non-medical X-ray machines, possibly used as weapons, radiation as punishment, cancer as execution delayed by years. Bärbel Bohle and Vera Lengsfeld discover Hohenschönhausen's capacity for manufacturing enemies in 1988. Both civil rights activists, both arrested for protesting election fraud. The charges matter less than the process. Months of interrogation designed to break spirit before breaking body. Their crime: believing East German democracy meant something beyond propaganda. Transport to Hohenschönhausen follows choreographed terror. Windowless vans disguised as grocery trucks. Prisoners loaded in individual compartments. Driven in circles for hours around Berlin. Disorientation begins before arrival, when van doors open in the prison garage. Blinding lights complete the sensory shock. Darkness to brightness, confusion to control. Processing strips away identity systematically. Personal belongings confiscated. Prison uniforms issued. Numbers replace names. Cell assignment based on psychological profile rather than crime. Some get windows with frosted glass bricks showing only colored blur. Others stare at concrete walls. The architecture itself becomes weapon. Sleeping regulations reveal the system's obsession with control. Prisoners must sleep on backs, hands visible above blankets. Suicide prevention becomes psychological torture. Guards monitor through peepholes every 15 minutes. Rest becomes impossible. Exhaustion accumulates like compound interest on despair. Interrogation rooms' design reflects operative psychology's influence. Barred hatches separate questioner from questioned. Distance creates psychological advantage. Lighting calculated for maximum discomfort. Chairs positioned to create submission posture. Every element serves the breaking process. The Stasi's hunger for information becomes self-perpetuating. 170,000 official employees, 500,000 unofficial collaborators, informants as young as 14 years old. Information gathering justifies the system's existence. Intelligence feeds operations. Operations require more intelligence. The cycle consumes East Germany's social fabric. 44 years of operation, 1945 to 1989. Over 11,000 people imprisoned for political reasons in the Stasi era alone. Hundreds of thousands more processed during Soviet occupation. Each case documented, each interrogation recorded, each psychological profile archived, the bureaucracy of oppression preserved for posterity. November 1989. The Berlin Wall crumbles. East German storms Stasi headquarters across the country, but not Hohenschönhausen. The prison remains untouched in its exclusion zone. Guards destroy evidence while crowds celebrate freedom elsewhere. Documents burned, records shredded. The systematic erasure of systematic horror. October 3rd, 1990. German Reunification Day. Hohenschönhausen officially closes. The last prisoner, Stasi Chief Erich Mielke, architect of the system he helped perfect. Poetic justice tastes bitter when the machinery outlives its masters. The irony? The prison preserves itself by accident, not design. 1994. Former inmates establish Memorial Foundation. The preserved buildings become testimony. Guided tours led by survivors. Their voices replace the silence that protected the system. Michael Bradler, 9 months in the submarine, now shows visitors his former cell. The transformation from victim to witness completes the circle. Today, former Stasi personnel still live in surrounding neighborhoods. They avoid eye contact with memorial visitors. Some try disrupting tours. The perpetrators age alongside their victims. Sharing the same Berlin streets, but not the same memories, justice delayed becomes justice denied as natural death closes cases human law couldn't resolve. Daily routine at Hohenschönhausen followed precise psychological manipulation. Wake up at 600 hours. Stand immediately. No sitting on beds during daylight. Wooden stools positioned for maximum discomfort. Frosted glass windows showed only blue and green blur. Prisoners lost connection to outside world, to time, to seasons. Isolation became total sensory deprivation disguised as imprisonment. Barkus B-1000 vans delivered fresh victims weekly. The only van available in East Germany, painted with fake grocery advertisements, vegetables and fruits delivery service. Inside, metal compartments separated prisoners like cargo. Transport routes deliberately circuitous. Hours driving through Berlin before arrival. Disorientation begins in motion, completes in darkness. Guard training at the Juristische Hochschule emphasized psychological pressure over physical force. Course materials survived reunification, revealing systematic education in human destruction. Students learned to identify weakness, family problems, alcoholism, homosexuality, professional ambition. Each vulnerability became weapon. Clinical approach to psychological warfare taught like medical procedure. The Academy produced over 4,000 dissertations on operational psychology between 1955 and 1989, double-digit submissions on Zersitzung techniques alone, academic conferences discussing human decomposition like chemical reactions, university credentials for psychological torture, PhD programs in systematic oppression, higher education perverted into higher cruelty, temperature control, weaponized comfort, cells heated to 53 degrees Celsius in summer, unregulated radiators covered in sharp metal edges. Winter brought unheated concrete chambers, prisoners stripped to underwear regardless of season, thermal torture avoided leaving marks while maximizing suffering. Body temperature regulation became psychological battleground. Interrogation schedules followed sleep deprivation protocols. Sessions began at midnight, continued past dawn. Exhausted prisoners faced fresh interrogators working rotating shifts. Questions repeated for hours. Answers rejected without explanation. Circular logic designed to break rational thought. Sleep became luxury prisoners couldn't afford. The second CTA arrives mid-script as planned. If you're fascinated by documented Cold War secrets, make sure to subscribe and let us know your location in the comments. This investigation continues using primary sources from the Stasi Research Archive at the Federal Commissioner for Stasi Records, specifically documentation from operational files released in March 2025. These aren't tourist brochures, these are the classified training materials that show exactly how the Stasi turned psychology into weaponry. Mario Rolig, former prisoner turned memorial guide, describes arrival procedure with clinical precision. Autumn, strip search in bright room after hours in darkness, every orifice examined. Personal effects cataloged, then destroyed. Prison uniform issued in wrong size, too large for humiliation, too small for discomfort. First psychological assault before first question asked. Medical experiments expanded beyond radiation. Dr. Herbert Vogel's staff conducted sleep deprivation studies, psychological profiling through pharmaceutical intervention, behavioral modification through controlled nutrition. The hospital wing became laboratory for human experimentation disguised as prisoner healthcare. Medical ethics, abandoned for state security research. Laboratory records from 1987 details systematic drug testing, psychotropic medications administered without consent. Behavioral responses documented for interrogation optimization. Prisoners unknowingly participated in pharmaceutical research designed to enhance their own psychological destruction. Science perverted into systematic torture. The prison's location strategy maximized psychological impact. Residential neighborhood surroundings created false normalcy. Apartment buildings housed Stasi families within sight of detention center. Children played in yards overlooking exercise cages. Domestic life juxtaposed with systematic oppression. The banality of evil made literally neighborly. Housing assignments for Stasi personnel followed strict protocols. Only trusted party members lived in surrounding blocks. Informants monitored informants in recursive surveillance cycles. The prison community became self-policing panopticon where everyone watching prisoners. Social control extended beyond prison walls into surrounding society. Wolfgang Templin experienced Zersetzung's full spectrum after co-founding Initiative for Peace and Human Rights in December 1985. Fake advertisements published in his name. Bogus letters signed with his signature. Daily harassment from strangers following planted newspaper stories. Year of psychological terrorism targeting entire family. Children threatened with custody removal. Social destruction calculated like military campaign. Zersetzung tactics evolved constantly. Moving furniture in targets' home during absence. Adjusting alarm clocks, switching tea varieties, subtle domestic disruption designed to induce paranoia. Victims often didn't recognize systematic harassment. Friends dismissed complaints as mental instability, perfect gaslighting disguised as coincidence. Informant networks reached stunning proportions by 1989. 1 in 6 East Germans provided information to Stasi. Husbands spied on wives. Children reported parents. Teachers monitored students. Neighbors watched neighbors. Social fabric dissolved under systematic suspicion. Trust became luxury the state couldn't afford its citizens. Recruitment methods varied by target psychology. Blackmail for compromising behavior. Financial incentives for economic desperation. Career advancement for professional ambition. Ideological conviction for true believers. The Stasi understood human motivation with scientific precision. Each informant recruited through personalized psychological assessment. Children as young as 14 served as unofficial collaborators. School surveillance extended beyond classrooms into family dinners. Homework assignments included reporting suspicious conversations. Youth organizations became recruitment grounds for future informants. Childhood innocence systematically corrupted for state security purposes. The memorial receives 400,000 visitors annually, half for students discovering their country's hidden history. Former prisoners lead most tours, sharing personal testimony that no textbook can replicate. Michael Bradler, 9 months in the submarine, shows visitors his former cell. Here I learned silence, he says simply. The understated delivery multiplies impact. Friedemann Kerner points to East Berlin maps showing Hohenschönhausen as blank space. Official cartography erased the prison's existence from public consciousness. This is how they made us disappear, he explains. Not just from freedom, but from reality itself. Geographic censorship represented ultimate information control. Modern parallels emerged during tours. Guantanamo Bay's sensory deprivation techniques. Enhanced interrogation's psychological pressure. Black sites, isolation protocols. The technology evolves, but principles remain constant. Democracy's enemies learn from each other across decades and continents. Historical lessons ignored become contemporary warnings. Siggy Grunewald, female guide and former prisoner, describes gender-specific humiliation techniques, forced observation during clothing changes, invasive medical examinations, pregnancy tests as psychological warfare, sexual degradation disguised as security procedures. The regime exploited gender vulnerabilities with calculated precision. Prison labor extended beyond cell construction. Inmates manufactured espionage equipment in basement workshops, document forgery training for future operations. Spying technology production using prisoner expertise. The detained became unwilling accomplices in their own oppression. Forced collaboration multiplied psychological damage. Residential complexes surrounding the prison housed 3 generations of Stasi families, grandparents, parents, children living within sight of systematic torture. Normal family life continued while neighbors disappeared into basement cells. Cognitive dissonance became a community standard. Evil normalized through proximity and repetition. The Grotewohl Express, named after East Germany's first Prime Minister Otto Grotewohl, transferred prisoners between detention facilities. Windowless railway car divided into individual compartments. Hours of transport and moving isolation. Arrival destination unknown until doors opened. Psychological preparation through transportation. Terror. Prison workshops produced items for civilian use, furniture, textiles, electronics manufactured by political prisoners, consumer goods created through forced labor entered East German homes. Citizens unknowingly purchased products of oppression. The economy of systematic suffering integrated into daily life. Exercise periods lasted exactly 30 minutes in individual concrete courtyards. High walls prevented horizon visibility. Wire mesh ceiling blocked sky access. Fresh air rationed like prison rations. Physical movement became privilege withdrawn for behavioral infractions. Health maintained at minimum levels necessary for interrogation. Cell assignments followed psychological profiling rather than criminal categories. Intellectuals placed with manual laborers. Religious believers housed with atheists. Personality conflicts deliberately cultivated. Cellmate relationships became additional stress factors. Social isolation multiplied through strategic incompatibility. The Stasi employed over 100,000 full-time personnel by 1989. Administrative staff, interrogators, guards, analysts, informant handlers, massive bureaucracy required to process political prisoners. The machinery of oppression provided employment for a significant portion of East German population. Economic dependency on systematic suffering. Interrogation transcripts reveal questioning techniques designed for psychological breakdown rather than information gathering. Circular questioning. Contradictory accusations. Hours of silence followed by sudden shouting. Temperature manipulation during sessions. Lighting adjusted for maximum discomfort. Every environmental factor weaponized against prisoner psychology. The prison operated its own printing facility, producing false documents for international operations, passports, identity papers, official stamps created by detained experts, prisoner skills exploited for state espionage. Former victims became unwilling accomplices in future operations. Technical expertise extracted through psychological coercion. Visiting procedures for family members multiplied prisoner psychological pressure. Loved ones subjected to interrogation before visitation approval. Children questioned about parent activities. Spouses forced to provide information for visit privileges. Family bonds weaponized against detained relatives. Love became liability in Stasi calculations. Prison records. Detail, systematic nutrition manipulation. Calorie restriction, calculated for optimal interrogation. Cooperation. Vitamin deficiency induced to weaken psychological resistance. Food quality degraded systematically over detention period. Physical health maintained at levels just above collapse. Starvation disguised as institutional efficiency. The memorial's archives contain over 12,000 individual prisoner files, personal histories, interrogation transcripts, psychological evaluations, medical records. Each file represents systematic human destruction documented with bureaucratic precision. The banality of evil preserved in triplicate carbon copies. Former interrogators still live in surrounding neighborhoods, now elderly pensioners shopping at local markets. Victims and victimizers age side by side in unified Berlin. Justice delayed by legal technicalities becomes justice denied by natural death. Historical accountability complicated by contemporary proximity. Research continues revealing international connections. Training exchanges with Soviet KGB, technical cooperation with Cuban intelligence. Stasi expertise exported to Third World allies. The prison served as laboratory for global oppression techniques. Berlin's suffering contributed to worldwide systematic torture development. Construction blueprints show deliberate acoustic design. Soundproofing prevented screaming transmission between cells. Echo chambers amplified interrogator voices. Frequency manipulation induced psychological discomfort. Architecture itself became weapon in systematic psychological warfare. Buildings designed to break human spirits. The memorial preserves original furniture, equipment, documents, exactly as discovered in 1990. Cell doors hang open like broken mouths. Interrogation chairs positioned for maximum submission. Medical equipment arranged for human experimentation. Authenticity preserved through accidental neglect rather than intentional conservation. In 2021, construction crews excavating near the memorial discovered additional mass graves containing over 400 remains from the Soviet special camp period. Bodies buried without identification in lime-filled pits. Forensic archaeology revealed systematic disposal of inconvenient deaths. The earth surrendered secrets the state tried to bury forever.